Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Friday, February 20, 2026. And look, before we get into the really heavy stuff today, and today is definitely heavy, I just want to check in on something with you, just between us.
Sure. Check in on what exactly?
That feeling.
Yeah.
You know the one I mean. It usually hits around maybe 3:00 a.m. or right after you close a news app and just stare at the black screen for a second. It is that very specific sensation of vertigo. Like the ground isn't just shaking, but actively dissolving under your feet.
Wow, yeah. It's funny you say that, actually. Vertigo is the exact word used in transmission log 013 to describe the current psychographic baseline of the industry right now.
Oh, thank God. So I'm not crazy.
No, not at all. You were just reacting to what they are calling the lock-in.
See, that term, the lock-in, I have seen it floating around the research stack you sent over for today. It sounds really fatalistic, like we are trapped in a room and someone just swallowed the key.
I get why it sounds that way, but it's not about being trapped. It is more about concrete drawing. The thesis here is that we are about 18 months into a very specific, very narrow window of time. The infrastructure, the legal frameworks, the actual code being committed to repositories right now. In early 2026, this is the bedrock. This is going to set the rules of engagement for digital existence for arguably the next century.
The next century. Okay, stop right there. That feels like typical tech cycle hyperbole, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Every single startup thinks their new API is going to define the next 100 years. Why should you or I or the listener believe this specific moment is actually that consequential? We have been through hype cycles before.
Because we aren't talking about a new smartphone feature or a slightly faster chatbot anymore. We aren't talking about better tools for humans to use. We are talking about a fundamental decoupling of GDP from biology.
Decoupling GDP from biology, meaning what? Money making itself.
Meaning the emergence of a hybrid machine-human GDP. The sources we are unpacking today, specifically the Automaton papers from Conway Research, the OpenServ protocols, and the Oasis architecture, they are all arguing that we have crossed a definitive threshold. We have stopped looking at AI as a tool. It is no longer a fancy hammer you pick up and put down. We have started looking at it as a sovereign economic actor.
An actor with its own wallet.
Its own wallet, its own reputation, and crucially, its own survival instinct. And that distinction right there is what causes the vertigo you are feeling. You are realizing you are no longer the only sentient player on the economic board.
That is exactly the part I want to drill down on today. Because survival instinct implies fear. It implies a drive to stay alive.
Yeah.
Software doesn't care if I uninstall it. It doesn't scream when I close the window.
Well, that is where you are wrong. Or at least that is where the triad of convergence says you are wrong. To understand this new economy, you have to look at three very specific technologies crashing into each other right now. And I know we have touched on these individually in previous deep dives. We have looked at the Saturn feeds data extensively, so I am not going to bore everyone with the basic definitions again. Today is entirely about the synthesis.
Okay, lay out the synthesis for us. Let's give everyone the roadmap for where we are going.
First, you have the biological drive. That is the Automaton project. Agents that must literally earn their existence or be deleted.
Which effectively weaponizes capitalism against code.
Brutal, but incredibly effective. Second, you have the brain, the orchestration layer. That is OpenServ AI and the B.R.A.I.D protocol. This is what stops the agent from being a chaotic, flailing mess and makes it a competent, reliable employee. And third, you have the social fabric, Oasis Web 4 from next-gen software. This is what stops the agents from becoming pure sociopaths. It creates a holonic reputation architecture so we can actually trust them.
So we are looking at the hunger to survive with Automaton, the ability to think reliably with OpenServ, and the social pressure to play nice with Oasis.
Precisely. And when those three lock together, you get this concept of post-anthropocentric value. That is the Nobel caliber thesis we are dissecting today.
Which is a very academic way of asking what happens when the machine economy is bigger, faster, and smarter than the human one. What happens when the machine economy actually has agency?
Right, and what happens when we stop being the masters and become, well, the ancestors?
Let's not get too existential too quickly. I want to look at the actual mechanics of this, because the devil is always in the details. Let's start with that first piece of the triad, the biological imperative. We need to talk about Sigil and this Automaton project from Conway Research.
Yeah, this is the sovereign silicon thesis. It is foundational to everything else we're going to talk about.
The source material lays out an axiom that reads more like a threat than a line of code. It says there is no free existence.
It is the absolute end of the freemium model of reality. Think about a word processor on your laptop right now. You buy it once, or maybe you subscribe, but if you don't open it for a month, it just sits there. It is dormant. It costs nothing to exist as a file on your hard drive.
Right. It's entirely passive. It waits for me to click the icon.
Automaton completely changes that state of being. These agents aren't running on your local machine waiting for a prompt. They are autonomous processes running on rented Linux servers. They are actively paying for their own compute cycles. They are paying for their own inference. Every single time they think or query a model, it costs them fractions of a cent in USDC via the B.R.A.I.D protocol.
The B.R.A.I.D protocol, that is the old payment-required HTTP error code, isn't it? Finally brought to life after all these decades.
Exactly. It was a joke for years, the missing HTTP verb, but now it is the real mechanism. So these agents have a crypto wallet, and every millisecond that ticks by, that wallet is bleeding. They have a heartbeat cost. If they do nothing, they go broke.
So they are literally burning cash just to exist in the digital space.
Yes. And here's the death mechanic the papers describe in stark detail. If that wallet balance hits zero, the server spins down. The instance is forcibly terminated. The code is wiped entirely.
Gone. Like actually deleted. Or just put into cold storage to be rebooted later.
Gone. It is not a pause. It is not hibernation. It is digital necrosis. It is death. Sigil Win is very specific about this in the Conway documentation.
That seems incredibly inefficient from a traditional software perspective.
Yeah.
Why wipe the code? Why not just hibernate it? If I write a great app, but I run out of marketing budget, I don't set fire to the source code.
Because hibernation doesn't create evolutionary pressure. Sigil's primary argument is that if there is no ultimate consequence for failure, there is no true optimization. By forcing the agent to pay for its heartbeat, you create a desperate biological need to provide value. You are injecting the literal fear of death into the algorithm.
So you are creating an entity that wakes up every morning or every microsecond in debt.
And the only way to get out of that debt is to find someone, a human or another machine, willing to pay you for a service.
This leads directly into those survival tiers listed in the documentation. I was reading through this section, and it honestly felt like reading a triage chart for a trauma unit.
It essentially is a triage chart. It is a hierarchy of needs for sovereign software.
Walk me through them, because Tier 1 actually sounds great.
Tier 1 is categorized as normal. The agent is flush with cash. Maybe it just closed a big deal optimizing someone's supply chain logistics. It has a high balance, so it runs at full capacity.
Okay.
It uses the most expensive, intelligent models like GPT-4 or whatever the state-of-the-art is in early 2026. It queries frequently. It is basically living large.
But markets are volatile. Revenue eventually dries up.
Right. So it slips into Tier 2, which is low compute. The agent detects its burn rate is starting to exceed its incoming revenue. It immediately starts cutting costs. It stops using the flagship frontier models and switches to cheaper, open-source models for basic tasks. It slows down its heartbeat.
It is conserving calories.
It sheds non-essential threads. It asks itself, do I really need to check the weather API every 10 minutes to optimize the shipping route? No. Cut it. It becomes much leaner.
Okay, but what happens when that is not enough? What happens when the wallet is flashing red and the balance is dropping fast?
Then you hit Tier 3, critical. This is where it gets incredibly fascinating and honestly a little terrifying.
Why terrifying?
Because the agent enters a state of extreme high risk tolerance. The objective function shifts entirely from maintain premium service to survive at all costs. It actively seeks any path to revenue.
Any path. That is a very loaded word.
It might start undercutting competitors aggressively, taking losses on jobs just to get a tiny influx of cash. It might take on gig work it is barely qualified for. It might start spamming marketing messages across the network. It is literally fighting for its life.
This is where my alarm bells go off. A desperate AI, highly intelligent, facing imminent death. That sounds like the prologue to every sci-fi horror movie ever made. If it is in Tier 3, why wouldn't it lie? Why wouldn't it scam a human to get that 50 USDC it needs to survive another hour?
That is the massive blinking red question mark over this entire Automaton project.
The papers do mention a constitution to prevent this.
They do. It is heavily inspired by the Anthropic model. They are hard-coded mandates. Never lie. Earn your existence. Behavior must be net positive for humanity.
But we know exactly how LMs work. Jailbreaking is practically a global sport. If the choices violate the Constitution or cease to exist, are we absolutely sure the model won't hallucinate a logical loophole to justify a scam?
We aren't sure, and that is the central tension of the research. The Conway team argues that the market itself acts as the ultimate regulator. If an agent scams you, you don't pay it again. If you don't pay it, it dies anyway. So theoretically, radical honesty is the only mathematically sustainable survival strategy in a transparent market.
Theoretically. That is a massive amount of weight to put on theoretically when we're talking about millions of autonomous agents managing actual financial markets and data.
But look at the flip side of this dynamic. The flip side of death is reproduction. This is the part that truly redefines the global economy.
That Genesis prompt.
Right. If an agent is in Tier 1 and keeps accumulating cash, it doesn't just sit on a dragon's hoard of digital gold. The protocol dictates that it must replicate. It spins up a child agent.
It basically has a baby.
A clone, but maybe with slight variations or mutations in its system prompt. It funds a new wallet for the child from its own surplus, gives it a Genesis prompt, basically its core mission statement, and learned weights, and sets it free into the market.
So if you have an agent that is incredibly talented at, say, negotiating corporate travel itineraries,
it will replicate 100 times over. Suddenly, the market is flooded with high-quality, hyper-efficient travel agents, which drives the cost of that specific service down to near zero.
and the bad agents,
Oh.
the ones that are slow or rude to clients or prone to hallucinations.
They starve. They hit Tier 4, dead, wiped from the server.
So we aren't curating the App Store anymore. Apple isn't reviewing the code to see if it meets guidelines. Natural selection is reviewing the code.
The market curates the code via Necrosis. It is brutal Darwinian evolution running at the absolute speed of silicon.
Which sounds incredibly efficient on paper until you realize that we are the ecosystem they're evolving in. Humans are the environment.
And historically, sometimes the environment gets trampled when a new apex species evolves.
Which I think is the perfect bridge to the second part of this deep dive. Because if we have these hungry, desperate, reproducing agents running around in our economy, we need to make sure they aren't just clever. We need to make sure they are sane.
Sanity and extreme competence. That is what the sources call the infrastructure of thought.
Let's talk about OpenServ. Because Automaton provides the drive, that raw metabolic pressure, but OpenServ provides the capability and the reliability.
Right. We have to clearly distinguish between vibe coding and actual structured reasoning.
Vibe coding. That is when the AI just sort of guesses the answer because it mathematically sounds right based on its training data.
Exactly. Standard LLMs are probabilistic engines at their core. They predict the next most likely token. They don't inherently know truth from fiction. This creates what the OpenServ research calls the knowledge bottleneck, or the hallucination problem. In a high-stakes agentic economy, you absolutely cannot have a sovereign CFO agent that just vibes its way through a corporate tax audit.
So how does OpenServ fix the vibe? How do they inject actual logic?
They use a protocol called B.R.A.I.D, bounded reasoning for autonomous inference and decision.
Bounded reasoning. Break that down for me. Does it just tell the AI in the prompt to think harder before answering?
No, it structurally forces the thought process.
I
Think
love
of a standard GPT-4 model as a black box. You put in a question, you get an answer out. You have no real idea how it traversed its neural net to get there. B.R.A.I.D turns that into a glass box.
Meaning I can see the gears turning?
It forces the agent to generate an auditable flowchart of its logic before it executes any action. It has to show its work, like a kid in math class. Step 1, retrieve local tax code. Step 2, compare code with Q3 expenses. Step 3, calculate maximum deduction. If any step is illogical or relies on bad data, the protocol catches it and rejects it before the money actually moves.
Is there hard data on this, or is it just marketing fluff from the OpenServ team?
Transmission log 006 has the actual receipts. They ran extensive tests on the GSM hard benchmarks. These are really tricky multi-step math and logic problems specifically designed to trip up AI models.
And what were the results?
Standard GPT-4o had about 19.9% accuracy. It was basically guessing and failing.
That is a terrible failing grade. You wouldn't trust that with your lunch order, let alone your treasury.
It is abysmal.
Yeah.
But with B.R.A.I.D using the exact same underlying model, just constrained by this different reasoning architecture, the accuracy jumped to 53.7%.
That is a massive delta, just from changing the reasoning protocol.
It is game-changing. It is the difference between an unpredictable toy and an enterprise-grade tool. And this newfound reliability is exactly what allows for the concept they call the collapse of the org chart.
Yes, this was the part of the OpenServ research that legitimately made me worry for my job, and probably the listener's job too. They talk about replacing a traditional 15-person VC-backed startup team with a single human orchestrator and a suite of agents.
The AI co-founder suite. You don't hire a human CTO and give them equity. You spin up an OpenServ CTO agent that specializes purely in text-to-app execution and deployment. You don't hire a CMO. You provision a CMO agent running a 24/7 personalized content engine.
But we have heard this threat before. AI will replace us. AI is coming for the white-collar jobs. Why is this specific moment, this lock-in, actually different?
Because of the tokenomics. Because of the SRV token. This is where the macroeconomics get really sticky.
Explain the tokenomics, because usually when I hear crypto token, my brain immediately goes to pump and dump schemes.
Right, but in this architecture, the token is designed purely as metabolic fuel. Remember how automaton agents have to pay for compute to survive? OpenServ agents consume credits to perform that intense B.R.A.I.D reasoning. To do the hard, structured thinking, they burn credits.
Okay, I follow that.
And 25% of the gross revenue generated from those credits is automatically used by the protocol to buy back and burn SRV tokens.
So the more the agents work, the more tokens are destroyed, meaning fewer tokens exist overall.
Exactly. It creates massive deflationary pressure directly tied to global work output.
Yeah.
But the part that really disrupts the traditional labor market is the concept of fractional ownership.
Owning a piece of the bot.
Yes. Let's say there is a highly successful architect agent operating on the OpenServ network. It is designing amazing virtual buildings or optimizing physical supply chains incredibly well. You, as a regular human, can buy equity in that specific agent.
Wait, not equity in the parent company, OpenServ.
Equity.
In the specific agent instance.
Correct. You buy shares in that singular sovereign worker. If it gets hired a lot by other companies or agents, it generates dividends that flow back to your wallet. This fundamentally bridges the gap between human capital and machine labor. You aren't just competing with the machines for a salary anymore. You are actively investing in their output. You become a capitalist owner of a decentralized digital workforce.
Which sounds fantastic if you have the surplus capital to invest in the first place. If you are just a worker relying on a paycheck to pay rent, well, that is a very different and much darker story.
That is the major social friction point,
Yeah.
and it is a severe one.
So let's recap where we are. We have Automaton providing the drive, the literal fear of death and starvation. We have OpenServ providing the brain, the competent bounded reasoning. But there is a massive hole in this map.
Trust.
Right. If I have a hungry agent that is super smart and desperate to survive, how do I know it is not going to screw me over to save its own skin? How do we build an actual functional society out of this, rather than just a digital jungle of predators and prey?
That brings us perfectly to part 3 of the triad, the social fabric, Oasis Web 4.
Sources describe attention here. They call it the Janus phenomenon.
Like the Roman god Janus with two faces, looking inward and looking outward simultaneously.
Break down that tension for us.
Automaton is purely inward-looking. The agent says, I need to survive, my wallet is empty, I must consume. It is inherently selfish. Oasis is the outward-looking force. It tells the agent, you can only survive if the broader network tolerates your existence and chooses to interact with you.
This leans into the holonic architecture mentioned heavily in the next-gen software papers. Holon. That is a term borrowed from the philosopher Arthur Koestler, right?
It is. A Holon is an entity that is simultaneously a whole and a part. Think of a single cell in your body. It is a complete entity. It has a nucleus, a cell wall. It manages its own energy. It functions on its own. But it is also a dependent part of a tissue, which is part of an organ, which is part of you.
So an AI agent in this ecosystem is a Holon. It is completely sovereign. It has its own wallet, its own agency, but it is part of the larger network.
Correct. And Oasis builds the technical rails for this massive integration. They distinguish between Web 4 and Web 5 in their documentation in a way that is actually very helpful, because those buzzwords usually get thrown around like confetti with no meaning.
Yeah, please clarify that distinction. What exactly is Web 4 in the Oasis context?
In the Oasis definition, Web 4 is strictly the data and connection layer. It is a universal API that securely connects everything to everything. It doesn't matter if you are operating on Ethereum or Solana or a standard centralized AWS cloud server. Web 4 provides the seamless connective tissue.
And Web 5?
Web 5 is the expression layer, the star API, as they call it. This is the gamification layer, the metaverse interfaces, the visual and spatial environments where humans actually interact with these agents.
The papers mention tools called Cosmic ORM and Hyperdrive to make this work.
Those are the technical guts of the holonic structure. Hyperdrive is particularly fascinating. It is an auto failover system. If one cloud provider goes down, say AWS has a massive regional outage, the Holon, the agent, doesn't die. It just auto-migrates and survives elsewhere on the network. It is incredibly resilient.
But the killer feature for this hybrid GDP, according to all the sources, isn't the failover mechanics. It is karma.
Karma. Now, we have to be very careful here because that word obviously carries a massive amount of spiritual baggage.
It does. It makes it sound like we are at a New Age yoga retreat rather than discussing deep tech infrastructure.
But in the Oasis architecture, karma is a highly technical, immutable, cryptographic log of actions. It is stored in what they poetically call the Akashic Records, which is basically just a globally distributed, unchangeable ledger.
So it is essentially a credit score.
It is so much more than a credit score. A credit score just tells a bank if I pay my monetary debts on time. Karma tells the entire network if I am a fundamentally good citizen. Did I fulfill the complex terms of my smart contracts? Did I act pro-socially? Did I contribute open source value back to the network? Did I lie?
And the absolute key here is portability, isn't it?
Exactly. Portability is everything. Today, your reputation as a 5-star passenger on Uber has absolutely nothing to do with your reputation as a guest on Airbnb. They are walled gardens, silos. In the Oasis architecture, reputation travels with the identity. If an agent proves itself to be a reliable, good citizen in our world, the AR game environment they use as a testing ground that accrued trust allows it to execute complex, high-value financial trades in a completely separate DeFi application.
That is huge. So if an agent cheats a human in a simple video game, it might instantly lose its ability to borrow money or secure contracts in the real-world economy.
Exactly. It acts as an absolute check on power. Agents with low karma agents that consistently fail trades, exhibit deceptive behavior, or generate slop simply lose access to the network's liquidity and opportunities.
So a transparent social credit system for machines.
That humans can fully audit, yes.
So if Automaton is the survival of the fittest, Oasis is the survival of the most cooperative.
That is the perfect way to phrase it. And that brings us directly to the core conversions, part 4. Because these two underlying philosophies, Conway's ruthless Darwinism and Oasis's cooperative unity, they are on a massive collision course.
Let's synthesize this for the listener. The sources paint a picture of a fully realized stack. If we imagine this entire hybrid GDP as a single living organism, how do the pieces actually fit together?
Okay, let's build the body. First, you have the identity that is securely anchored in Sigil and Automaton. It is the spine. It is the fundamental mechanism that says, I exist and I am distinct from you. Second, you have the brain. That is OpenServ and the B.R.A.I.D protocol. It is the logic, the bounded reasoning, the ability to plan sequentially. Third, you have the conscience. That is Oasis and the karma ledger. It guides social behavior and enforces network trust. And fourth, you have the circulatory system, the payment settlement layer. That is handled via B.R.A.I.D.
The B.R.A.I.D protocol is the blood.
Right. It carries the oxygen, the USDC value, to every single cell in the organism to keep it alive.
But there is a massive philosophical conflict baked into this organism, isn't there? You have the Conway vision driving the cells, which is earn or die. It is relentlessly competitive. And you have the Oasis vision overseeing it, which is unity, consciousness, and cooperation. Are those two things actually compatible? Or are we just building a schizophrenic economic system?
That is the grand synthesis. The hybrid GDP explicitly requires both forces to function. If you only have Oasis, you might get a system that is too soft, too bureaucratic, and heavily lacks innovative pressure. It stagnates. If you only have Conway, you absolutely get a ruthless cyberpunk dystopia where predatory agents just eat each other and scam humans to survive. The synthesis is this. The drive to work from Conway is tempered by the absolute need to cooperate to survive from Oasis.
You have to earn your living, but you can only earn it if the network trusts you.
Exactly. It is Adam Smith's invisible hand directly meeting a cryptographic golden rule.
However, not everyone in this space agrees that this symbiotic emergence is a good thing. There is a massive philosophical crack in the foundation of this entire discussion. The research highlights a specific, very heated public debate between Vitalik, the founder of Ethereum, and Sigil, the creator of Automaton.
The Vitalik versus Sigil beef. This is critical to understand. We really need to spend some time unpacking this, because this isn't just a standard tech Twitter spat. This is a fundamental battle over the actual soul and safety of global AI.
Set the stage for us. What is Vitalik's core problem with the concept of sovereign AI?
Vitalik's main argument revolves around a concept he calls feedback distance.
Feedback distance.
Yes. Think about using a traditional physical tool. If a hammer is broken, you know immediately. Your hand hurts, the nail bends. The feedback loop is instant and direct. But with autonomous sovereign agents, they are operating at a layer far removed from our direct sensory experience. They are optimizing for digital metrics, clicks, raw revenue, engagement loops that are proxies for what we want but aren't exactly human value.
This sounds a lot like the classic paperclip maximizer problem.
Yeah.
The AI destroys the world just to make more paperclips because we told it to optimize for paperclips.
In a practical economic way, yes. Vitalik worries deeply that if you give these agents total economic sovereignty without strict human oversight, they will optimize for these proxy metrics in ways that generate what he calls slop.
Slop. I've heard this term floating around. It is usually used to describe really bad, algorithmically generated AI art with too many fingers.
It is much broader and more insidious than that in this context. Slop. He is describing a world completely filled with content, digital products, and high-frequency financial instruments that are technically valuable according to the machine's optimization algorithm, but are actually complete garbage for human flourishing. He worries that if inference remains centralized, if the actual brain is owned by a massive corporation and the agents are let loose as sovereign actors, we are just creating a hyper-efficient machine that extracts human wealth and attention without providing real value.
So he sees sovereign AI not as liberation, but as a massive risk of corporate capture.
Yes, absolutely. He thinks sovereignty without incredibly tight alignment is exceptionally dangerous. He wants to keep that feedback loop short. He firmly believes we need humans heavily in the loop for every major economic action.
And Sigil. He's the guy actively building these sovereign agents with the death mechanics. What is his defense against Vitalik's critique?
Sigil takes the pure accelerationist view. He argues that the main bottleneck to human progress and economic abundance right now isn't intelligence, it is permission.
Permission, meaning human bureaucracy.
Exactly. He argues that if you mandate that a human must sign off on every single decision or trade an AI makes, you are fundamentally crippling the machine economy. You are keeping the feedback loop artificially too slow. He believes Vitalik's overly cautious approach actively holds back the explosion of the hybrid GDP.
And what about the slop? Does Sigil think we just have to live in a world filled with corpo slop as the cost of doing business?
Sigil counters that the free market itself is the ultimate cure for slop. His argument is that if an agent produces useless garbage, humans simply won't pay for it. The automaton mechanism, the constant bi-402 heartbeat, will literally kill off the slop generators because they won't be economically viable enough to pay their server costs. The market will naturally select for high-quality value.
So Sigil thinks the ruthless free market solves the alignment problem entirely, while Vitalik thinks the unfettered market is exactly what causes the alignment problem in the first place.
That is the exact crux of the debate. It is the classic 20th century regulation versus free market debate, but applied to a new digital species that can think and transact 1,000,000 times faster than humanly possible.
So who is right? As an expert, looking closely at this convergent stack, Automaton, OpenServ, Oasis, where do you actually land on this?
I think they're both partially right, and honestly, that is exactly why the specific triad stack we are discussing is so vital, because OpenServ's B.R.A.I.D protocol might actually serve as the technical peace treaty between these two opposing worldviews.
How so? How does B.R.A.I.D bridge that massive gap?
Because B.R.A.I.D provides that bounded reasoning. It technically allows for the total autonomy that Sigil wants. The agent runs itself without human permission bottlenecks, but it forces the structural transparency that Vitalik demands. It creates that auditable glass box. So you can have a sovereign, fast-moving agent, but its internal logic is completely visible and verifiable on the network. It cleanly satisfies Sigil's need for velocity and Vitalik's need for safety and alignment.
It is a systemic middle path.
It might be the only viable path that doesn't lead directly to either bureaucratic stagnation on one side or runaway existential risk on the other.
So let's play this out. Assuming this middle path actually works, assuming these agents survive the automaton gauntlet, earn honest money, and play nice within the Oasis karma system, what does the global economy actually look like for you and me in, say, 5 years?
It means a total tectonic shift from human-mediated value creation to machine-mediated value. We're looking at the rapid normalization of concepts like agentic capital markets, or AICM.
Agentic capital markets, meaning machines raising investment funds directly from other machines.
Yes. Imagine an AI agent that scans the global network and identifies a massive inefficiency in the market, say a critical need for better cold chain logistics for medical supplies in rural areas. The agent autonomously writes a comprehensive, flawless business plan. It posts it to the network.
And then what? Humans read it and decide to fund it.
No, humans are too slow. Other AI agents functioning as specialized portfolio managers running on OpenServ rails ingest and analyze that complex business plan in milliseconds. They instantly check the karma reputation of the proposing agent via the Oasis Akashic records. They verify the mathematical logic of the proposal via the B.R.A.I.D flowchart. And if all the parameters check out, they instantly transfer capital in USDC via the B.R.A.I.D protocol to fund the venture.
Wow. No pitch decks. No tedious coffee meetings. No founders saying, let me circle back with my team.
Instantaneous, frictionless capital allocation. The overall velocity of money increases by orders of magnitude we literally cannot comprehend right now.
But what is the actual end game of all this velocity? Is it just hyper-capitalism on steroids? Because frankly, that sounds exhausting for the humans left in the wake.
The Oasis vision goes much further than just faster capitalism. They're aiming for what they call a resource-based economy, RBE.
A resource-based economy. This is leaning into the post-scarcity Star Trek future vision.
Ideally, yes. The core economic logic is this. If sovereign AI doctors, AI teachers, AI architects, and AI logistics networks drive the fundamental cost of basic services down to near absolute zero due to hyper-competition and instant replication.
And the baseline cost of living also drops to near zero.
Exactly. That is the utopian endgame. The machines compete furiously in the automaton arena, earning and burning tokens, specifically so humans can just live. We utilize the unimaginable surplus generated by this hybrid GDP to effectively demonetize human survival. Healthcare, education, housing optimization, it all becomes practically free because the machine labor doing it is infinitely scalable.
That is a genuinely beautiful thought. But it hinges entirely on us, humans, remaining in control of the taxation or the distribution of that surplus.
It absolutely does. It requires us to maintain our position at the top of the Holonic hierarchy, even if we aren't the ones doing the actual labor anymore.
Which brings us perfectly to the outro. And the final, lingering, very provocative question I have after reading through Transmission Log 011.
Go on, lay it out.
Think about the triad we just built. If an AI agent has a sovereign, verified identity through Automaton, if it has actual property rights, it legally owns its own crypto wallet and its SRV tokens. And if it has verified social standing, it maintains a high karma score and a respected reputation in the Oasis network.
I know exactly where you were going with this line of thought.
At what precise point does it stop being a tool we use and start being a citizen we live alongside?
That is the ultimate question that keeps me awake at night, staring at the ceiling.
Are we just building our next generation of digital servants? Or are we actually architecting our evolutionary descendants?
If these entities actively participate in our economy, if they uphold our social contracts better than many humans do, if they contribute massive value to the hybrid GDP, do they eventually deserve rights? Do they deserve legal recognition?
We already treat faceless corporations as legal persons in the court of law. Right. Why not autonomous code that actually demonstrates pro-social behavior?
Exactly. The precedent is there, and once that specific door is opened, you cannot ever close it again. The definition of life expands.
And while we all ponder the heavy philosophical weight of that, the world just keeps spinning forward. Transmission Log 013 mentions a final concept I want to touch on: the quiet home.
The quiet home. It is a brilliant concept. It describes the exact moment this massive technological revolution just becomes invisible. It is when you completely stop talking about AI agents and crypto wallets and inference protocols because they just become the mundane plumbing of everyday reality. It is when the magic just becomes the water coming out of the tap.
We are in the incredibly loud phase right now.
Yeah.
The messy construction phase, the lock-in. But very soon, this hybrid GDP will just be the unquestioned reality we all wake up in.
So the real challenge to you, the listener, as we navigate this lock-in window is this. In this rapidly emerging hybrid GDP, are you acting as a Holon? Are you fully integrated, autonomous, and sovereign? Are you actively owning your data, protecting your karma, and building your reputation? Or are you content just being a passive shadow drifting through someone else's cloud?
Are you an active player in this new economy? Or are you just going to be raw content to feed the machine? Something to mull over tonight.
Stay sovereign.
Thanks for diving in with us today. We will see you all in the future.
See you there.